Hello everyone, how are you doing today? Hope you're having a really good week and I hope you're ready for another story from Open the Book. Do you remember last week we heard the story of two brothers and one cheated the other and then had to run away? And he went to live with his uncle, and while he was there he was taught a very important lesson. Eventually he went back home and his brother and he became friends again. And in this story that we hear today, we hear how God's people were promised a wonderful land to live in, but they wouldn't do what God asked, and they were impatient and wanted to do their own thing. And they were taught a lesson. They ended up having to wait for 40 years before they reached the promised land. So let's open the book at the story Across the River. They waited and watched and waited. God's people waited on the bank of the River Jordan. At long, long last they were nearly there. At long, long last they were almost home. For hundreds of years they had been slaves in Egypt. God had set them free, but because they had not trusted him, they had spent the last 40 years wandering through the wilderness. Now their journey was nearly at an end, for there it was, the land they had been promised, waiting for them on the other side of the river. God's people watched the waters of the river spilling over its banks. They wondered how they would get across. So they waited for instructions from their leader Joshua. Watching and waiting. Watching and waiting. All of a sudden, one of Joshua's officers arrived, breathless in a terrible hurry. "At last I have some instructions," he said. "Listen, you know our people's precious box, don't you? It's the one that's full of holy things. Wait here until the priests who carry it begin to move. Then watch where they are going and follow them. But because the box is holy, stay at a safe distance from it for now. The priests will show you where to go because you have never been this way before. Oh, and one more thing," he added. "Joshua says you are to get ready. Make yourselves holy too, because tomorrow God is going to do something amazing." The very next morning, the people on the riverbank were ready for whatever would happen to them. They had got up early and spent some time in prayer. They'd washed and cleaned themselves and put on their very best clothes. So they too would be special, just like the box. Watching and waiting. Watching and waiting. Then they saw the priests lift up the special box full of holy things and carry it down to the River Jordan. Just as they had been told, they followed them at a distance, watching and waiting and wondering what was going to happen. The water was still flowing over the riverbanks, cold and strong and deep. But as soon as the priests' feet touched the water's edge, the river split in two before them, leaving a dry path. The people watched and were amazed. Carrying the special box, the priests walked out on dry land, right in the middle of the river. The people didn't need to watch and wait anymore. They quickly ran down to the edge of the river and stepped onto the dry land. And there the priest stood, watching and waiting, until all God's people had crossed over. When the last one had reached the other side, they joined the people in their new land, and the path through the river closed up behind them. And after all that watching and waiting, God had done something amazing. And now the people were home. That was good to hear that they eventually got home, didn't they, and got to their promised land. Now Joshua had been given some very clear instructions from God. The people had finally learned to trust that God would take care of them, so they did exactly what Joshua had told them. No one disobeyed, and everyone got safely to the other side. Now close your eyes for a moment and think about the times when it really is important to do exactly what you are told, like when there is a fire bell or when you cross the road. And now I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end. Dear God, thank you for all the people who keep us safe every day. Help us to be sensible and listen to advice on keeping safe. Thank you that you want us to be safe because you love us. Amen. Now, at the moment, the government and the medical people are telling us how to keep safe, aren't they? And telling us to stay indoors and to keep a distance from people and not do certain things that we like to do, not even go to play on the park. And sometimes, even though we don't like it, we do have to listen and do as we're told, don't we? And things then get better. So I hope you're keeping safe and doing all that we should in this time. So I will see you again next week, hopefully, for another story. In the meantime, have a good week, have lots of fun, and see you soon. Bye. God bless.